Thank you very much, Aid. Confirmation that, as talkSPORT have been reporting for the last 24 hours, the squad is very much the 26 that we've been letting you know over that time. I'm going to read them out in total, but the headlines are: Ivan Toney is in. John Stones, despite missing so much of the season, also in. The big names that we said that were out as expected: Maguire, Phil Foden, Cole Palmer, all out as we knew. But let me go through the squad in full for you. The three keepers, as we've been reporting: Dean Henderson, James Trafford and Jordan Pickford. Defenders: Dan Burn, Jed Spence, Reece James, Ezri Konsa, Jarell Quansah, wish they weren't next to each other, John Stones, Mark Gahey, Nico O'Reilly, Tino Livramento, also who's been having injury problems this season. The midfield is Declan Rice, Eberici Eze, Elliot Anderson, Jordan Henderson, Jude Bellingham, Kobbie Mainoo, as we've been reporting, and Morgan Rogers. And the forwards: Anthony Gordon, Bukayo Saka, Harry Kane, Ivan Toney, Marcus Rashford, Noni Madueke and Ollie Watkins. They are the 26 players, bar injury, of course, because Harry Kane is involved in a cup final for Bayern Munich tomorrow. We've got the Arsenal players involved in the Champions League final additionally, bar any injuries, because we've got the Premier League as well this weekend on the final day. Those are the 26 players all heading out to North America in Thomas Tuchel's World Cup squad. I mean, look, we've been dissecting it all morning. The biggest headline for me is Maguire missing and Ivan Toney included. I can give you my reasons as to why I think that is the case. Maguire is a centre-back. He doesn't play in any other position behind that line. Thomas Tuchel has said to me previously that he's his fifth choice centre-back. Jarell Quansah is in there because he can play across the back line. In addition, Dan Burn can play left-back as well. Ezri Konsa can play right-back, so I understand the versatility there. John Stones is the big question because of the injuries that he's had, but he is a phenomenal player. And Thomas Tuchel, when he spoke to me in the last camp, said, you know, he hopes that he's not fit. They'll manage it, that he's fit, they'll manage his minutes, etc. Ivan Toney, we know what he can deliver from the penalty spot. He's delivered for England in a major tournament before. Yes, he's only played 5 minutes for Thomas Tuchel in that June game against Senegal, but he plays in Saudi Arabia, where they play in temperatures of 30 degrees and above. So he is already acclimatised to playing in that kind of heat. And it also then takes away the question mark of so many of the players who can play a false nine. Well, we've got 3 strikers, including Ollie Watkins and Harry Kane, which means that we don't have to keep having the conversation of Marcus Rashford playing as a false nine, or Anthony Gordon. So those are my 2 big decisions that Thomas Tuchel has made and why I think he's made them. But of course, I'll be sitting down with him in the next hour or so to get confirmation as to what his thought process was.
Faye, when you just mentioned, you know, hopefully there'll be no injuries, but when you mentioned that, my heart sank, because straight away you said the name Harry Kane, and we all know Harry, and all you were saying was he's got a cup final to play, so, you know, hopefully and fingers crossed nothing will happen, but without him it feels to me like we're a bit doomed. Having said that, do you think there's a case to say given the length of this World Cup and the heat of the World Cup and what you've just said about Ivan Toney there, Harry Kane might not actually start group games for England?
I don't know about that. It depends. So the acclimatisation camp is really key. Bayern Munich not getting to the... Sorry, somebody's just talking to me in my ear, but I can't... what I was trying to say was Harry Kane, basically, if he starts, it's all about the acclimatisation. That's what I was saying. Champions League is really important. So Bayern Munich not getting to the Champions League final gives Harry Kane more time out in Florida, where they're acclimatising to the intense temperatures that they're going to have to deal with in the World Cup. He is going to be able to have that prep camp that he may not have done, which some of the Arsenal players aren't going to have because they're in the Champions League final, which is really key. So actually I do think that Harry Kane will start group games. We've seen that before, but he will have to manage his minutes for sure. And I think that is really important. I think having 3 strikers, it's something that we questioned previously in squad announcements, is how many strikers he'd decided to say. So I think that is really important. I did mention Reece James, by the way. The producer was saying to me, I don't think Reece James was mentioned. I did mention him, by the way, which is why I'm now sounding completely confused, Aid. He was.
Okay.
I mentioned him.
Reece James is in. For those anybody who's in any doubt, Reece James is definitely in. Faye did say that. So, listen, there will be players that are disappointed. It's great to get it confirmed. I mean, most of those stories talkSPORT had unearthed anyway. I just want to focus on the John Stones thing. And you've spoken to Thomas Tuchel many times. We've both interviewed John Stones on England camps. And you mentioned there, a phenomenal player, and he has been a phenomenal player for Manchester City and for England as well. You and I both respect what John Stones has brought for club and country. Is he still a phenomenal player? Because he's played 8 minutes of Premier League football since December the 2nd. I think it's a highly controversial pick from Thomas Tuchel.
I wouldn't go as far as you in terms of being highly controversial. I would have predicted that John Stones would be in because of the conversations I've had with Thomas Tuchel and how highly he rates John Stones' leadership qualities behind the scenes. And we know that he's brought in Dan Burn, Jordan Henderson as an example. That's really crucial. And John Stones has been such a stalwart of the England squads over the years that I would have been more shocked had he been left out, even though that sounds bizarre when you think about the amount of minutes he's played. I think probably, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because Reece James is injury prone and has only just come back from another layoff, that right back position, which Jed Spence can obviously play, Tino Livramento can obviously play, but also Ezri Konsa can play. That's my slight question mark, because if the first two centre-back, if the first choice centre-back pairings are Mark Guehi and Ezri Konsa, which I think they are, bearing in mind the injury problems that John Stones has had, and then we get a problem at right back, and Ezri may have to move to right back. That's where it starts to get a bit tricky. But actually, all of the players, are flexible and versatile in that back line, bar Mark Guehi, who just tends to play as a centre-back. Everybody else can play in a different position, including John Stones, who can play in midfield. And I think that is really important. He's clearly looking ahead as to managing minutes, players who've had long seasons, players who are injury prone. It's risky, without a doubt, but I can understand the thinking behind it.
Faye, I'm looking at the squad and put them down in their thirds, basically, in their positional situations. And he's picked 9 defenders. Normally you would go with probably 8 in the hope that someone could fill in a defensive position. I think the fact that because he's got question marks on fitness with Stones, with James, and maybe even Livramento thrown into that with his injury record, I think that is what's cost the likes of Cole Palmer a place in this squad. I really do. The fact that he's got to safeguard his back line, so he's picked 9 players there. That's how I'm seeing this. And one of the players, normally what you say, you put more players in your team that can get you a goal to win you a game. Defensively, you can probably mix and match, maybe. And I think he's added that extra defender because of those injury situations and question marks of those 3.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right with that. And, if it's Cole Palmer, who was next on the list, is the player that's missed out, then, that is a shame, because he is a maverick. We know what he can bring, but we just haven't seen it enough. What I do like about Cole Palmer is he has played in these temperatures out in the US. He did it last year and won the FIFA Club World Cup. So for me, that's why I perhaps would have included Palmer, but you can't look at his form over this season, and perhaps that's because of the exertions of the Club World Cup that he has then broken down on numerous occasions. He's had a problem with his groin that just does not seem to go away. It recurs quite a lot, so perhaps not worth the risk. And we always talk about defence winning tournaments, and yet, some of the question marks are that why are we taking an extra defender? Well, if defences win tournaments, then it makes sense to take the extra defender. Then you've got Nico O'Reilly, who can drift into midfield anyway. So you do have some of those defensive players who are attacking minded. Reece James also attacking minded down the right hand side. So, again, I think you could put a different 26 together and make an argument for every single player included or excluded. And I think what you have to do is look at the balance, look at the context, and this is why Thomas Tuchel and his team have come to a lot of these decisions. I also wanted to mention that the heat training that they did back in June in that camp that we went to in Spain, and they will have stats on all of the players and who did well under exertion in those kind of temperatures, and that's going to be really key for both for the warm-up camp and then as soon as they get to Kansas, and they will know the kind of players that are able to cope in those kind of temperatures and still, you know, deliver the level of performance that you're going to need in what is going to be, without the 2 warm-up games, 8 games in 33 days in, you know, quite differing temperatures across North America. And I think that will have played into a lot of their thinking as they've compiled this 26 as well.
I just want to ask you about leadership, because we've talked about Dan Burn being part of the leadership group and being well respected by the others. So even if not playing, he will be a huge part of the squad. Jordan Henderson, exactly the same. Rarely will he, I don't think he will start for England, probably never again in his career, but plays the odds substitute appearance, few minutes here and there at the end of games. How important, you've spoken to Thomas Tuchel a lot about this, how important are these leadership figures? You know, because some are saying they should be there in a coaching capacity rather than playing capacity, taking up a vital squad place.
I think that's disrespectful, because they're playing in the Premier League, these players. Jordan Henderson plays for Brentford, Dan Burn plays for Newcastle, John Stones plays for Manchester City. They are so important. I think everybody who I've spoken to within the England setup with regard to Euro 2024 in Germany highlighted how missed Jordan Henderson was behind the scenes. I don't think you can underestimate how important having players like that keep everybody grounded, that are the conduit between, you know, the different groups of players, although they are very united. You know, there are certain players that galvanise the youngsters, perhaps. You know, we know the relationship that Jordan Henderson has with Jude Bellingham, that can potentially help him while he's out there, and he's one of our crucial players. You know, I think it's really easy as players age in particular, and perhaps lose their legs ever so slightly, but they're still operating at the highest level in the Premier League, and yet we're still suggesting that they shouldn't be playing for England. Well, they've got both aspects there. They play for Brentford, have done brilliant things this season. Newcastle perhaps undersold themselves this season, but you know, these are players that play at the highest level week in, week out, and they've now done it for England, and Jordan Henderson has done it for England for many years. So I actually think they are very important, and there are certain players that if they don't in a squad, and Stuart will attest to this, some players can't cope with not getting any minutes in a major tournament. Others, and you know, we always cite Conor Cody as a perfect example of that, for example. Some players are so vital because they don't kick off if they're not involved, because in training they're vital in pushing their teammates who are going to go then and deliver on the training pitch. You know, these players are just as important as the starting 11 that go out there and the 5 substitutes that come on to try and win the game.
Faye, you're going to have a busy day, so we'll let you digest that squad a little bit more. Faye Carruthers outside Wembley with news of the England squad, which I'll repeat for you in just a second. And actually, just thinking about it then, no England reporter anywhere on the planet has asked Thomas Tuchel more questions than Faye Carruthers since he started the job. So if anybody's going to know about Thomas Tuchel and his thinking, it's going to be Faye Carruthers. Overall, we now know the squad officially. Stuart, Pearce, so what's your verdict? Are they bringing it home? Are we going to win the World Cup with that squad?
If we defend well enough, we'll cause a lot of teams a lot of problems. We got enough in the midfield area and at the front end of the team. I'm really pleased with the 2/3 of the team. Pickford, obviously a permanent fixture in goal. Trafford's come on to brilliant form as well, which I like. Defensively is the question mark, where we'll travel to the States and think, are we going to be good enough collectively, defensively, to bring some silverware home?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We talked about little sliding doors moments and one person's decision. Man United decided to get rid of Amorim, brought in Carrick. He put Kobbie Mainoo back in the team. Kobbie Mainoo's going to the World Cup means the likes of James Garner or Alex Scott, they miss out.